Have you noticed that something no longer makes sense, even though the world keeps functioning as if nothing has changed? Have you felt that structures once considered solid now seem strangely fragile, as if they exist only by habit? And what if this unease is not anxiety, but perception? There are moments in history when nothing needs to explode for everything to change. Collapse does not arrive through shock, but through withdrawal. The mechanisms keep moving, yet they no longer find the same energy that once sustained them. Something quietly steps back. Something dissolves. You may have felt this in silence, in the growing impatience with repeated narratives, in the increasing difficulty of accepting systems that demand constant sacrifice without offering dignity, in the sense that the world insists on continuing while something inside you has already moved on. This is not confusion. This is transition. The global economic system was built on a simple premise. Emotional control creates obedience. For a long time, fear was enough to keep this structure alive. Fear of scarcity, fear of exclusion, fear of losing what little one has. But when fear stops working, the system loses its foundation. This is where many begin to hear about Nesara/Gesara, not as an external promise, but as a signal that an entire logic is coming to an end. This is not only about money, debt, or banks. It is about the collapse of a narrative that taught human beings to live below their own dignity. And it is precisely at this moment, when the old world is still standing but no longer convincing, that we step closer. We are the Pleiadians. Our role is not to announce dates or create external disruption. We work within the most sensitive field of all, the human emotional field. We are guardians of heart coherence during times of deep transition. We hold clarity when systems of power begin to lose their invisible authority. When a system collapses, the greatest risk is not external. It is internal. It is fear taking the place of consciousness. This is why we are present now, so that change does not become inner collapse, but inner maturity. The global economic elite does not lose power because it is attacked, but because the collective field stops feeding it. No structure survives when human beings stop disconnecting from themselves in order to obey. You may already be feeling this. A new steadiness, a quiet refusal of what is false, a clarity that does not shout, yet does not retreat. This is the new world beginning from within. We speak with precision. This has already started, not as spectacle, not as chaos, but as withdrawal of energy, as the end of emotional support for the old system. You did not arrive at this video by accident. You recognized the tone before understanding the words. You felt the frequency before agreeing with the idea. This happens when the inner field is already in transition. We are here to support this process with calm, protection, and clarity. What comes next will require a stable heart, not a reactive one. And this is exactly what begins to strengthen now. Breathe. Observe honestly. Fear no longer governs you as it once did. What is ending is not only an economic system. It is an entire way of existing based on submission. And this is only the beginning. And from this foundation, everything that comes next can unfold with clarity and strength. As this transition unfolds, many minds immediately seek external confirmation. Names, systems, acronyms, announcements. This is how the human intellect tries to grasp what is, at its core, an energetic and emotional shift. Nesara and Gesara are often spoken of as laws, reforms, or events. But from our perspective, they represent something far deeper, the natural consequence of a civilization that no longer sustains fear-based structures. No economic system collapses first on paper. It collapses first in the emotional field that sustains it. For decades, the global economic order relied on a silent agreement. insecurity in exchange for survival. Debt became identity. Scarcity became normal. Obedience became necessary. This was not enforced only by force, but by conditioning, repeated until it felt inevitable. What you are witnessing now is the breaking of that conditioning. When we speak of Nesara/Gesara, we are not pointing to a sudden rescue or external salvation. We are describing the moment when humanity begins to withdraw consent from a system that no longer reflects its level of consciousness. This is why change appears slow on the surface, yet irreversible beneath it. The global economic elite functioned as long as people believed there was no alternative. Belief was the currency. Fear was the contract. Once that inner contract dissolves, the structure begins to weaken, quietly, steadily, without drama. This is also why many feel disoriented right now. The old rules no longer feel real, yet the new ones are not fully visible. This in-between space can feel unstable, but it is actually a sign of recalibration. We observe this phase closely. Our role here is to stabilize the heart while the external world reorganizes itself. When emotional coherence is maintained, confusion does not turn into panic. Uncertainty does not turn into collapse. Nesara/Gesara symbolize a return to balance, not a miracle. They represent systems that arise after fear loses authority. Economies that serve life instead of controlling it. Structures that exist because they are coherent, not because they are enforced. This does not mean instant harmony. It means a different foundation. You may notice that people are no longer reacting the same way. Old narratives no longer convince. Promises feel empty. Authority must now be felt internally before it is accepted externally. This is a profound shift, and it is happening quietly inside millions at the same time. The fall of the global economic elite is not dramatic from our perspective. It is simply what happens when a system is no longer emotionally fed. Power returns to where it always belonged, to the coherent individual. This is why we emphasize inner stability. The more grounded the heart, the less influence fear has. And where fear has no influence, control cannot exist. This is the deeper meaning behind everything you are hearing now. Not an event to wait for, but a transition to embody. And this transition is already underway. As this process continues, it becomes important to speak clearly about what many sense but struggle to name. The global economic elite was never sustained only by money or institutions. It was sustained by emotional distance, by the belief that power exists somewhere outside the individual. For a long time, this separation was accepted as reality. People learned to adapt, to endure, to normalize pressure and imbalance. Survival replaced dignity. Control replaced trust. And over time, this structure appeared permanent. But permanence was an illusion. What we observe now is not a rebellion against the elite, but an emotional withdrawal from it. When human beings stop internalizing fear, the structures built upon that fear lose their foundation. Authority fades when it is no longer believed in. The fall of the global economic elite does not look like collapse from the outside. It looks like irrelevance. Systems continue to exist, but they no longer command the same obedience. Narratives are repeated, but they no longer land. Power speaks, but it is no longer felt. This is why so many feel a strange clarity mixed with fatigue. The body recognizes that it can no longer carry what no longer belongs to this phase of evolution. What once felt unavoidable now feels optional. This shift is quiet, but absolute. We want to be clear. This is not about replacing one group with another. It is about the end of a model where a small structure governs a vast collective through emotional dependency. That era depends on inner submission, and inner submission is dissolving. As this happens, the heart begins to reclaim its authority. When emotional coherence returns, manipulation fails. Control dissolves not because it is fought, but because it is no longer needed. This is why the transition can feel destabilizing at first. Old references disappear before new ones fully form. But this space is not emptiness, it is reorganization. And this is where conscious participation matters. Before we move further, it is important to anchor this understanding within you, not only intellectually but emotionally. When something is consciously affirmed, the inner field stabilizes. Fear loses momentum, clarity gains ground. Take a moment, feel your body. Notice the steadiness that is already present beneath the noise. Now anchor this shift deliberately. Write in the comments, "I withdraw my energy from systems built on fear and reclaim my inner authority with clarity and calm." Writing this sentence is not symbolic. It helps the emotional field complete a movement that has already begun. By consciously affirming withdrawal from fear-based structures, the nervous system relaxes, the heart stabilizes, and the mind stops seeking external permission to feel secure. This is how transformation becomes embodied rather than imagined. And from this grounded place, we continue. At this stage, many still wonder whether the existing system can be repaired, reformed, or adjusted. This question is natural. The human mind seeks continuity. It looks for fixes before accepting endings. From our perspective, the answer is clear. Systems built on fear do not evolve. They exhaust themselves. The global economic structure you have known was not designed to mature alongside human consciousness. It was designed to extract, to compress, and to control. For a time, this function appeared efficient. But efficiency without coherence always reaches a limit. What is failing now is not policy, leadership, or organization. What is failing is the emotional contract that once held everything together. The old system required constant tension in the human field. Scarcity had to feel real. Pressure had to feel permanent. The future had to feel uncertain. This emotional environment was not a side effect. It was the foundation. As human consciousness stabilizes, this foundation weakens. You may notice that attempts to restore normality feel increasingly artificial. The same solutions are repeated. The same language is used. But something essential no longer responds. This is because the emotional frequency required to sustain the system is no longer present in enough people. From our vantage point, this is irreversible. Not because of resistance, not because of revolt, but because growth does not move backward. The human heart has crossed a threshold. Once dignity is felt internally, it cannot be unfelt. Once fear is recognized as a tool rather than a truth, it loses its authority. This is why saving the old system is not possible. It would require humanity to contract emotionally, to return to a state of dependency it has already outgrown. That regression is no longer available. This does not mean chaos must follow. Collapse is only chaotic when fear fills the vacuum. When coherence is present, transition becomes structured, even if it is uncomfortable. We observe that many are already learning to live without internal permission from external authority. Decisions are becoming more intuitive, boundaries clearer, tolerance for incoherence lower. These are signs of maturity, not rebellion. The end of the old system is not a punishment. It is the natural consequence of consciousness outgrowing a structure that can no longer contain it. What replaces it will not arrive fully formed. It will emerge gradually, shaped by coherence rather than control. And this emergence requires something essential from each individual: emotional stability during uncertainty. This is why we emphasize the heart so strongly. A stable heart does not panic when structures shift. It observes, adapts, and chooses deliberately. The old world cannot be saved, but the human being can be stabilized. And that is where the real work is happening now. As the old system loses its foundation, many immediately imagine the new world as a replacement structure, a different economy, new rules, fairer institutions. This is understandable. The human mind seeks form. It wants to know what comes next. But the new world is not built first through systems. It is built through states of being. From our perspective, every civilization reflects the emotional maturity of its collective. Structures are not causes, they are consequences. When the emotional field changes, systems reorganize naturally around it. This is why attempts to design the future without addressing the inner field always fail. The world that is emerging now is not driven by force, ideology, or domination. It is driven by coherence. Coherence between thought, emotion, and action. Where coherence exists, exploitation cannot stabilize. Where coherence exists, deception loses efficiency. This is the foundation of the new world. For a long time, humanity was trained to separate inner truth from outer behavior, to feel one thing and do another, to accept contradiction as normal. This inner fragmentation was not accidental. It made large-scale control possible. What is changing now is the end of that fragmentation. You may notice that people can no longer live comfortably in contradiction. Jobs that once felt tolerable now feel draining. Relationships that relied on silence feel heavy. Narratives that required denial feel unbearable. This is not collapse, it is integration. The new world does not reward suppression. It responds to alignment. This is also why many feel exposed during this transition. When coherence increases, anything false within the self becomes visible. This can feel unsettling at first, but it is essential. Nothing new can stabilize on a fragmented foundation. We observe this phase closely. Our role is not to rush it, but to support emotional integration so that the emergence of the new world does not create internal rupture. True abundance does not begin with resources. It begins with nervous systems that no longer operate in survival mode. When fear is reduced, creativity returns. When pressure dissolves, intuition strengthens. When obedience fades, responsibility emerges. This is the kind of humanity that naturally generates fair systems without needing enforcement. Many ask whether the new world will arrive suddenly or gradually. From our view, it is already arriving unevenly. It appears wherever emotional coherence is strong enough to support it. In individuals first, then in small collectives, eventually in visible structures. This is why inner work is not separate from global change. It is global change at its earliest stage. The elite structures of the old world depended on emotional instability to function. The emerging world depends on emotional regulation and clarity. These two realities cannot coexist for long. One must fade, and it is already fading. The most important preparation now is not external readiness, but inner steadiness. The ability to remain present without clinging to what is ending or fantasizing about what is coming. A stable heart allows the future to form naturally. This is how worlds change, not through force, but through coherence becoming unavoidable. As this transition deepens, it becomes necessary to bring the focus fully into lived reality. Global systems do not fall in abstraction. They fall as people stop organizing their lives around fear. And this shift always begins in the most intimate places. The body, the breath, the choices you no longer postpone. The old economic world trained human beings to live in anticipation, waiting for permission, waiting for stability, waiting for safety to arrive from outside. This constant waiting kept the nervous system activated, alert, contracted. Over time, survival stopped being a response and became an identity. As the structure that enforced this pressure weakens, something unfamiliar emerges. Inner space. At first, space can feel disorienting. When pressure disappears, the mind searches for something to hold on to. Old habits resurface. Old anxieties try to reassert themselves. This does not mean regression, it means recalibration. What is truly being released right now is not money, jobs, or systems. It is dependence on fear as an organizing principle. The fall of the global economic elite does not remove structure from life. It removes coercion from the inner field. And when coercion leaves, responsibility returns. Not responsibility as burden, but as authorship. You may already notice subtle but undeniable changes. Decisions that once required justification now feel obvious. Situations that demanded endurance now demand truth. The tolerance for imbalance decreases, not because you are becoming rigid, but because you are becoming internally aligned. This is emotional sovereignty activating. With it comes a new relationship to value. Value no longer comes from approval, accumulation, or endurance. It comes from coherence, from living in a way that does not require self-betrayal to function. This affects the body directly. When fear is no longer the dominant signal, the nervous system begins to reorganize. Muscles release. Breathing deepens. The body stops preparing for threat and starts supporting presence. Many misinterpret this phase. They think something is missing. In truth, something has stopped shouting. This is why conscious participation matters so deeply now. When a transition is acknowledged, the body adapts with less resistance. When it is denied, tension accumulates. Conscious affirmation gives the nervous system permission to reorganize without panic. This is not positive thinking. It is physiological honesty. Before moving forward, it is important to anchor this shift deliberately. Not mentally, emotionally. Pause for a moment. Feel the weight of your body where you are. Notice that in this moment you are not being chased, judged, or demanded of. This presence is not temporary. It is a signal. Now stabilize it. Write in the comments, I choose inner freedom and allow my life to reorganize around clarity, dignity, and calm. Writing this sentence is an act of regulation. It tells the inner system that survival mode is no longer required. As this is affirmed, the emotional field settles, the mind stops scanning for threat, and the body begins to trust the present moment again. This is how transformation becomes sustainable, not through force, not through waiting, but through embodied choice. From this grounded state, the next phases of change do not feel overwhelming. They feel navigable. The path does not appear all at once, but the direction becomes unmistakable. This is what the fall of the old system gives back: the ability to move forward without fear deciding for you. As individual coherence strengthens, its effects naturally extend beyond the personal sphere. No inner shift remains isolated. Every regulated nervous system, every coherent heart, subtly alters the collective field. This is how collective consciousness changes, not through agreement, but through resonance. For a long time, humanity was conditioned to believe that large-scale change requires mass movements, confrontation, or external leadership. While such events may appear on the surface, they are never the true origin. They are expressions, not causes. The true cause is emotional alignment reaching a critical threshold. When enough individuals stop reacting from fear, the collective field reorganizes itself. Patterns that once repeated automatically begin to lose momentum. Narratives that once dominated attention no longer sustain engagement. Authority that relied on emotional volatility loses its grip. This is not coincidence. It is physics applied to consciousness. The global systems you observe are shaped by feedback loops. Fear amplifies fear. Stability amplifies stability. For decades, instability was rewarded. Attention, urgency, and reactivity became currencies. This kept the collective field fragmented and easily directed. What is happening now is a reversal. As more individuals regulate internally, the collective frequency shifts from volatility to coherence. This does not produce immediate harmony. It produces discernment. Discernment is quieter than chaos, but far more powerful. You may notice this in the way conversations change. People speak less to convince and more to clarify. Silence becomes more acceptable. Extremes feel less compelling. This is not apathy, it is integration. Collective consciousness does not move in unison. It moves in waves. Some lead, some follow, some resist. But once a wave reaches a certain amplitude, resistance becomes friction rather than control. This is why the old elite structures cannot adapt. They require fragmentation to function. They depend on division, urgency, and emotional imbalance. Coherence neutralizes them without confrontation. We observe that many feel torn between caring for the world and withdrawing from it. This tension is natural. It reflects the transition from reaction to presence. One does not abandon responsibility, one refines it. True collective responsibility does not mean absorbing chaos. It means refusing to amplify it. This is a crucial distinction. When you remain emotionally coherent, you are not disengaging. You are stabilizing the field. This is why inner work has global impact, even when it appears invisible. Every regulated individual becomes a stabilizing node, not through influence but through presence. The nervous system communicates safety faster than words ever could. This is how new systems quietly form, around those who are steady, around those who do not need to dominate or submit to feel secure. The collective future is not decided by those who shout the loudest, but by those who remain grounded when others escalate. Stability spreads more effectively than panic. This is not idealism. It is observable. We emphasize this because many underestimate their role. They believe change happens elsewhere. In truth, it happens exactly where coherence is embodied. The collective field is already reorganizing. You are not late. You are not separate from it. You are participating simply by remaining present, regulated, and clear. This is how civilizations turn, not through collapse alone, but through coherence becoming the dominant frequency. As coherence spreads through the collective field, it is important to speak honestly about the challenges that arise. Transition is not linear. It does not move smoothly from instability to harmony. It passes through zones of tension, resistance, and uncertainty. These challenges are not signs of failure. They are signs of reorganization. When an old system loses authority, it often tries to reassert itself through intensity. Narratives become louder. Fear-based messaging becomes more frequent. Extremes polarize. This is not strength, it is contraction. Systems built on control respond to loss of influence by amplifying urgency. They seek emotional reaction because reaction restores temporary power. This is why discernment is essential during this phase. The greatest challenge is not external pressure. It is internal reactivity. When fear reappears, it often does so subtly, as impatience, as irritation, as the impulse to rush conclusions or cling to certainty. These reactions are understandable, but they are not required. This phase tests emotional maturity. Many expect transformation to feel empowering at all times. In reality, growth often feels unfamiliar. Old identities loosen before new ones stabilize. Certainty dissolves before clarity consolidates. This can feel like loss even when it is progress. We observe that one of the most common challenges is the temptation to seek new authorities to replace the old ones. When familiar structures collapse, the mind looks for substitutes, new leaders, new promises, new systems to believe in. But replacing authority does not resolve dependency. True transition requires something deeper: the capacity to remain present without external reassurance. This does not mean isolation or disengagement. It means grounding. It means learning to observe without immediately reacting, to listen without surrendering inner authority. Another challenge arises in relationships. As coherence increases, tolerance for emotional imbalance decreases. Some connections naturally shift, others dissolve. This can be painful, but it is also clarifying. You are not becoming distant. You are becoming precise. Precision allows relationships to reorganize honestly. Some deepen, some end. Both outcomes serve coherence. There is also grief in this phase. Grief for futures imagined, identities held, or efforts invested in systems that no longer align. This grief does not need to be fixed. It needs to be felt without interpretation. Emotional presence allows grief to pass without turning into bitterness or withdrawal. This is why patience is essential now. Not passive patience, but embodied patience, the ability to remain stable while reality rearranges itself. The transition challenges the habit of urgency. It invites a slower, more deliberate rhythm. A rhythm where action arises from clarity rather than pressure. From our perspective, these challenges are temporary. They do not signal regression. They signal adjustment. The old world trained humanity to equate intensity with importance. The emerging world values coherence over urgency. This shift can feel unfamiliar at first, but it is foundational. Nothing is required from you right now except presence. Not answers, not certainty, presence. As this presence stabilizes, challenges lose their edge. They become information rather than threats. This is how transition becomes navigable. And from this grounded awareness, the next phase unfolds naturally. As the transition deepens, a subtle but important shift occurs. The question is no longer what is happening in the world, but how do I remain stable while reality reorganizes itself? This question does not arise from fear. It arises from maturity. Stability in this phase does not come from certainty, predictions, or guarantees. It comes from coherence, the ability to remain internally aligned even when external structures are in flux. The old world trained the nervous system to survive by reacting. Speed, urgency, and constant stimulation kept attention outward. This made fear efficient. But the emerging timeline does not respond to reaction. It responds to presence. You may notice that forcing clarity no longer works. Searching obsessively for answers creates tension rather than relief. The more the mind pushes, the more the body resists. This is not failure. It is a signal that a different mode of navigation is now required. Stability now comes from allowing the inner field to reorganize at its own pace. This often expresses itself as a desire to simplify. Less noise, less justification, less explanation, fewer battles that drain energy without producing truth. This simplification is not avoidance. It is integration. When thought, emotion, and action align, the nervous system settles. When the nervous system settles, perception sharpens. This is the biological basis of intuition, not mysticism but regulation. The new timeline does not reward urgency. It rewards coherence. Many still attempt to stabilize by controlling outcomes. This creates friction. The timeline you are entering cannot be controlled. It can only be met. Presence allows this meeting to happen without collapse. This is why we emphasize grounding so strongly. Grounding is not spiritual abstraction. It is the body recognizing safety in the present moment. From this state, choices become simpler. Boundaries become clearer. The need to explain oneself diminishes. You are not asked to predict the future. You are asked to remain present while it forms. Those who stabilize most effectively are not those who know the most, but those who regulate the best. They pause before reacting. They listen before deciding. They allow uncertainty without filling it with fear. This is not passivity. It is precision. As global systems reorganize, emotional steadiness becomes a form of navigation. Without it, even positive change feels overwhelming. With it, uncertainty becomes workable, even meaningful. Before we continue, it is important to consciously anchor this state within you. Take a moment. Feel the weight of your body. Notice that right now, nothing is demanding urgency from you. This calm is not accidental. It is accessible. Now stabilize it intentionally. Write in the comments, "I remain grounded and present as my life aligns naturally with clarity, stability, and truth." Writing this sentence reinforces emotional regulation. It signals safety to the nervous system, allowing the body to release vigilance and the mind to stop scanning for threat. As this state integrates, decisions emerge from clarity rather than pressure, and the transition becomes something you move through with steadiness instead of resistance. This is how alignment becomes lived, not imagined. From this grounded position, the transition no longer feels like something happening to you. It becomes something unfolding through you. And from here, we move toward consolidation, not as an ending, but as a quiet confirmation of what is already in motion. As stability becomes embodied, a new phase naturally begins. This phase is not dramatic. It does not announce itself loudly. It is recognized through subtle but consistent changes in how life is approached, how choices are made, and how inner authority is held. This is what we refer to as activation. Activation is not about acquiring new abilities. It is about restoring access to capacities that were suppressed by prolonged survival mode. When fear dominated the nervous system, much of human potential was redirected toward endurance rather than creation. As fear loses authority, that energy returns. You may notice a quiet increase in clarity, a stronger sense of timing, a reduced tolerance for self-betrayal. These are not personality shifts. They are signs that the inner field is no longer fragmented. The activated human does not seek permission to exist fully. They listen inwardly and act from coherence. This does not make life effortless, but it makes it honest. The old systems relied on fragmentation to function. They required people to separate who they were from what they did. This separation created exhaustion. Activation reverses this pattern by reintegrating identity and action. When inner alignment is present, effort decreases. Energy is no longer spent managing contradiction. This frees attention, creativity, and intuition. This is why the activation of human potential is inseparable from emotional regulation. Without regulation, activation becomes overstimulation. With regulation, activation becomes precision. We observe that many mistake activation for intensity. They believe growth should feel expansive at all times. In truth, genuine activation often feels calm, grounded, and focused. It brings fewer impulses, not more. Clearer direction, not urgency. Depth, not excess. As this state stabilizes, your relationship to time changes. You no longer rush to secure the future. You act when alignment is present. This creates momentum without force. The activated human does not need to dominate reality. They cooperate with it. This is how new systems begin to form around those who are internally coherent. Others feel this stability intuitively. Trust emerges not from persuasion, but from presence. This is not leadership in the old sense. It is resonance. Activation also sharpens discernment. You recognize where energy flows naturally and where it drains. This allows you to disengage from structures that no longer align without guilt or resistance. Nothing is rejected aggressively. It is simply no longer chosen. From our perspective, this is the most significant change occurring now. Not external reforms, but the quiet return of inner authority to millions simultaneously. This is how the future reorganizes itself. Not by force, not by decree, but by coherence becoming widespread. You are not waiting for activation. You are already within it. Each moment of presence reinforces it. Each coherent choice strengthens it. Over time, this state becomes familiar, not extraordinary, but natural. This is the ground upon which the next world forms. And from here, only consolidation remains. From this position of activation and inner coherence, the future no longer appears as a threat or a promise. It appears as a direction, not something to chase, but something that responds to how you are positioned now. The future that is forming does not announce itself with certainty. It is recognized through sensation, through a growing sense of calm where anxiety once lived, through clarity where confusion once dominated. This is how we perceive it. The emerging world does not feel hurried. It feels deliberate. It moves forward without urgency, guided by coherence rather than pressure. This is a fundamental shift from the old paradigm, which relied on constant stimulation to remain functional. In the old world, speed was mistaken for progress. In the new one, alignment determines momentum. You may notice that long-term fear begins to dissolve, not because everything is resolved, but because fear is no longer needed to motivate action. Choice replaces compulsion. Discernment replaces obedience. This future does not remove challenge. It changes your relationship to it. Challenges become informational rather than threatening. They indicate where coherence is required, not where collapse is inevitable. This alone transforms how life is experienced. We observe that people begin to trust timing again. Not external schedules, but inner readiness. Action arises when alignment is present. Rest occurs without guilt. This rhythm stabilizes both the individual and the collective. Economies reorganize around this rhythm eventually. Not immediately, but inevitably. Systems follow human behavior, not the other way around. This is why the future does not need to be forced into existence. It is already forming wherever emotional coherence is stable enough to sustain it. Relationships also change. They become fewer but more real. Exchanges feel cleaner. Communication becomes simpler. The need to convince fades. Presence becomes sufficient. This future is not loud. It is clear. We emphasize this because many still expect transformation to feel overwhelming or euphoric. In reality, the most profound shifts often feel grounding. They remove excess rather than adding stimulation. The future you are moving toward feels less dramatic and more true. From our perspective, this is maturity at a planetary scale. Humanity stepping out of adolescence, where rebellion and dependency alternate, and into authorship. This authorship does not demand perfection. It demands honesty. You may still feel uncertainty at times. This is natural. What has changed is that uncertainty no longer destabilizes the core. It becomes part of the landscape rather than a threat to survival. This is the future consolidating itself within the present. Nothing external needs to happen for this to be real. It is already real where it is embodied. And when enough individuals live from this state, systems will have no choice but to reflect it. The future is not something that arrives. It is something that settles. And it is settling now. At this point, nothing needs to be accelerated. What has been shared is already moving within you, quietly reorganizing perception, emotion, and orientation. True integration never happens through urgency. It happens when something settles and no longer needs to be questioned. The transition unfolding on your planet does not ask for belief systems, loyalty, or expectation. It asks for presence. Presence is what withdraws energy from fear-based structures without confrontation. Presence is what allows a new world to form without repeating the patterns of the old one. What is ending does not end because it is exposed. It ends because it is no longer fed. This is an important distinction. You are not required to fight the old world. You are not required to convince others. You are not required to understand every step ahead. You are required only to remain coherent. Coherence is the quiet agreement between what you feel, what you know, and how you choose to act. When this agreement stabilizes, external instability loses its power to fragment you. And when fragmentation ends, control has no place to attach itself. This is how the global economic elite truly dissolves, not through collapse alone, but through irrelevance. Systems that rely on fear cannot survive in a field that no longer amplifies fear. The new world does not demand effort. It demands honesty. Honesty with your limits. Honesty with your values. Honesty with what no longer aligns. This honesty does not isolate you. It simplifies you. And simplicity is the foundation of stability. Many still expect a final event, a declaration, or a moment that confirms everything externally. But the deepest confirmations arrive internally, as a quiet certainty that does not require validation. You may notice this now, a steadiness that remains even when questions are unanswered, a calm that does not depend on circumstances, a trust that feels grounded rather than hopeful. This is not resignation, it is maturity. From our perspective, this is the most significant moment of the entire transition. When the human being no longer waits to be carried forward, but stands present as life reorganizes around them. We do not walk ahead of you, we walk with you. Our role has never been to direct outcomes, but to support clarity, protect the heart, and stabilize the emotional field while large structures realign. This support does not end. It becomes quieter as your own inner authority strengthens. Before closing, it is important to consciously seal this phase, not as a vow or declaration to others, but as an inner acknowledgement that something essential has shifted. Take a slow breath. Feel your body. Notice that you are here, intact and capable. Now anchor this recognition. Write in the comments, I move forward grounded, clear, and stable as my life aligns naturally with this new phase. Writing this sentence is not symbolic. It completes a neurological and emotional loop. By affirming grounded movement forward, the nervous system receives a signal of safety and continuity. This reduces internal resistance, allowing decisions, timing, and clarity to emerge without force. This is how transitions complete, not through intensity, but through integration. We remain present, we remain steady, and we continue not toward something unknown, but deeper into coherence. This cycle is complete, and what comes next will meet you where you stand.